SEP Fanfic Readings presents Aurelian by BittyBlueEyes. Chapter 12 Muggle World Introduction. Hermione stood in front of her bathroom mirror, pulling her hair back into a clip, when she heard a chime from her fireplace. She quickly fastened the barrette into place and headed toward the living room. "Good morning, Hermione stopped and stared dumbly at the man in her living room. "What?" Malfoy asked indignantly. Nothing." She shook herself from her daze and smiled. "I've just never seen you in Muggle clothing before." Hermione tried not to be rude by staring, but she couldn't help herself. Draco stood stiffly in front of her with his hands in the pockets of pressed black trousers with a black leather belt. His collared button-down shirt bore tight vertical blue stripes and was tucked in neatly with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows. "That's because I don't wear them often. We are going to a Muggle neighborhood, though, aren't we?" he asked petulantly. "Yes, and you look good. You look appropriate. I didn't mean to make you feel self-conscious or anything," she said apologetically. "I'm not self-conscious. I felt insulted," he corrected bluntly. "I'm sorry, really. I didn't mean to offend you. It's just a surprise. I hadn't thought about it. I'm sorry. You look good," she apologized profusely. She felt herself blush when she realized that she had told him twice that he looked good and silently pleaded for Harry to show up and save her from further embarrassment. He did look rather nice, but then he always looked nice. She kicked herself again for thinking such things. It wasn't that she found him attractive. She had never actually considered him in that respect. He just happened to be a well-dressed man. It was quite obvious that he took a lot of care with his appearance. She felt her cheeks get hotter and tried to think of something else to say, but nothing came. Luckily for her, Harry did show up. "Good morning," Harry greeted. "I'm not late, am I?" "No, you're right on time," Hermione addressed him with a smile, glad for something to take away the awkwardness that had erupted between her and Draco. She couldn't help notice, though, that Harry didn't seem at all surprised about Malfoy's attire. "You look nice," Harry told Malfoy, completely destroying Hermione's last thought. "They look like they fit all right. They feel okay?" "Yeah," Draco answered quietly. He pointedly looked away from Hermione when she saw a blush rise at his cheeks. She understood. Harry had given him the outfit. The thing she didn't understand was why he had been so offended. What had he taken from her stunned silence? "So, did you call the cab?" Harry inquired. "Yeah, it should be here in just a few minutes," Hermione affirmed. "The what?" Draco asked. "The cab. It's a personal Muggle transportation, a hired car," Harry explained. "I had assumed we'd be apparating," Draco said. "It'd be nice, but I'm really not all that familiar with the area," Harry confessed. "I wouldn't know of a good place to apparate to. Even if we did, I really don't know how Mr. and Mrs. Creevey feel about magic." "What do you mean?" Draco seemed completely confused by the comment. "Well, not all parents of Muggle-borns are comfortable with magic. Actually, I'd say that more often than not, the Muggle parents are a little leery when it comes to magic, especially after losing Colin. I think in general, it just makes Muggles feel more comfortable when wizards keep the magic to a minimum," Harry explained. A car horn sounded from outside, and Hermione peeked out the window. "That's the cab. Just let me grab my bag and I'll meet you out there." Harry and Draco walked out of Hermione's door and down the stairs to the street. Draco kept looking around uncomfortably. He'd been to Hermione's home a few times, but he had never set foot outside of it. He was stunned to see how busy the neighborhood was and how many homes were pressed beside each other. Even more disconcerting were the vehicles driving down the road. He'd seen them before, but the idea of getting into one wasn't something he was excited about. Malfoy followed Harry toward the black hackney carriage waiting at the curb directly in front of Hermione's building. He looked it over from the red lights and license plate on the back to the taxi sign and the shiny grille on the front. "Is it safe?" he finally asked stiffly. Something in his voice dared Harry to tease him for his apprehension. "Not nearly as dangerous as playing on a broom, if you ask me," Hermione smiled as she caught up with them. Draco looked at her, not certain what to make of her response. "It's really not a big thing, I swear. It's like the night bus, except not as fast and not nearly as frightening." "I didn't say I was frightened," Draco said defensively. Hermione looked at him curiously. "Neither did I. I admitted that I found the night bus frightening. It's okay to be apprehensive." "After you, Hermione," Harry offered as he opened the door for her. Hermione nodded and climbed in. "She's right, you know," Harry told Draco before he could follow. "It's okay to be apprehensive, and you don't have to be embarrassed. You should have seen me the first time I traveled by flu. And Hermione still won't get on a broom if she can avoid it. And she usually can." Draco nodded to Harry and entered the cab after Hermione. Harry followed directly after. Draco sat down uncomfortably, again just as uncomfortable with his company as he was with sitting in a Muggle vehicle. He still didn't know what to make of them. The more they tried to make him feel at ease, the more uneasy he felt. "Are you poking fun at me again?" Hermione asked as Harry sat down. Harry just smirked and acted as though he hadn't heard. Moss Lane, Harrow, he told the driver, before he sat back and latched his safety belt. Relax, Malfoy. It's about a 30-minute drive. All you have to do is pretend you're sitting on a sofa and relax. Don't patronize me, Potter, Draco insisted. I was trying to be supportive, not condescending, Harry argued. But I see where you're at, so have you been able to make plans with Pansy? I got an owl from her last night. We're going to meet tomorrow. I was hoping that she would be able to meet me tonight. He tried not to sound disturbed, but Harry and Hermione understood. He was concerned about how little time they had before Pansy would be attacked. Don't worry, Malfoy, Hermione said. We'll protect her one way or the other. We still have time. So, Draco tried to change the subject. Can you tell me a little bit about the Creevies? I know that Colin died during the war, but I didn't hear when, and, well, I don't actually remember him. Harry pulled out his wand and cast a non-verbal muffliato charm so that the driver would not overhear, and nodded to Hermione to continue. Colin Creevey was the boy with the camera that was petrified in our second year. He and Dennis, who's a year younger, were both wizards, which is rather rare to see in a Muggle family. They were both extremely excited by the wizarding world, but I don't really know what their parents thought of it. I know they were removed from school in Colin's 6th year with all that was happening in the Ministry and the Hogwarts. I heard that they had gone into hiding, but when the final battle started, Colin snuck into the castle to fight. He was killed there. Still, Dennis returned to school the next year. Draco nodded. You said that many Muggle parents are leery about magic. You believe the Creevies are? My guess is most likely. While the war did affect Muggles, it still hardly touched them compared to us. It had to be hard to know that their boys were involved in a serious war that they didn't understand, when they could have just returned home and continued their lives in the Muggle world without a problem, Hermione explained. Did your parents feel the same way? Draco asked curiously. Well, Hermione started uneasily. My parents didn't know about any of the things that happened until after the war. I experienced quite a bit in my time at Hogwarts. I was afraid that if they knew about it, they would have removed me from school, and that was something I would never have been able to accept. So they didn't know anything about Voldemort. They believed that the worst thing I had to face were insults because of my birth status. The summer after our 6th year, when I knew I would be going into hiding, I cast memory charms on them and sent them to Australia. They didn't even know I existed. When the war ended, I brought them back home. I reversed the memory charms, but I had a lot of explaining to do. Needless to say, they were not pleased and became more than a little wary of the wizarding world. They had to learn to accept it, though, because I could never be talked into leaving the world of magic. Draco nodded again. He had never actually considered before that day that Muggle parents might fear magic. It certainly made sense. He glanced over at Harry, and for only the second time in his life, he wondered at Potter's home life. He had heard that Potter had lived with Muggle relatives, but he knew nothing beyond that, and he had never cared enough to ever wonder any further. Sometime during the war, he began to see Potter a little differently, from just the famous and arrogant hero he had always believed him to be. But with all he had experienced in the last few days, Draco couldn't help but to have a new respect for the man, and it made him curious. Harry smirked and snorted a soft chuckle. You can ask, you know. It was only then that Malfoy realized that he had been staring at Harry out of the corner of his eye, and the man had caught him. Not only that, he seemed to have guessed what Draco was thinking. He felt baited into asking, and he suddenly didn't care again. He hated when Potter did stuff like that. But Harry saved him from asking. I lived with my aunt and uncle and my stupid cousin Dudley. They weren't just a bit wary of magic, they hated it. They were the exact opposite of pureblood supremacists. They believed that wizards were worthless, unnatural freaks. Harry shook his head, though he still wore a smirk. Draco's interest returned. He had never heard such a ridiculous thing in his life. They knew I was one, but they never told me. They hated me. I never knew wizards existed, let alone that I was one, until my 11th birthday when Hagrid broke down the door of the place they were hiding me. They hid me in hopes that I couldn't receive my Hogwarts letter. You're making this up, Draco accused. He's not, Hermione said. They were horrible. They gave him a pair of old dirty socks for Christmas. The summer after our first year, they put bars on his windows, and Ron, Fred, and George had to go break him out. It's kind of funny to share those stories now, but it was miserable, Harry explained. Things got a little better once I started threatening them. They were really afraid of magic. Things weren't quite as terrible then, for the most part. But I was never happier than to leave the Muggle world behind. Unlike Hermione, I don't have fond memories of Muggle life that I hold on to. I use my wand for everything. After working like a house elf for the Dursleys for the greater part of my childhood, I don't think I'll ever make my bed or wash another dish by hand. You say that you put Muggle things in your past, but you still wear a lot of Muggle clothes. You still like dining in Muggle restaurants, and I know for a fact that you're interested in seeing that new film at the cinema. I saw you looking through my newspaper for showtimes, Hermione challenged. I didn't say I put all things Muggle behind me, Harry argued. Just because I refuse to do chores the Muggle way doesn't mean I don't enjoy some Muggle things. And yes, I am quite excited to go to the cinema and see X-Men. Dudley was once given a large stack of X-Men comics for his birthday. Stupid, really, as anyone who knew him knew that he'd never waste time reading. I salvaged them from the rubbish bin. They're the only comics I ever read, and I loved them. Ginny really isn't all that interested, but she thought it'd be a nice date. You're welcome to come along if you'd like. You're inviting me along on your date with Ginny, Hermione chortled. No, I said that Ginny thought it would be a nice date. That was before Ron invited himself along. Now it's sort of an open invitation to anyone who'd like to come, Harry explained. Hermione chuckled and shook her head. I'll think about it. You have to let me know when you're going. Oh, but speaking of Muggle entertainment, after you left last night, Fred and George started inviting everyone to the amusement park. They said you had promised to take them again. Harry sighed in exasperation. I told them that perhaps we could go back someday. That was hardly a promise. It's quite a task babysitting the two of them in such a highly populated Muggle area. I know, Hermione said sympathetically. Maybe next time you should hold on to their wands. I know they can use wandless magic, but they might at least be less tempted. That's a good idea, Harry agreed. Oh, wait, this is it. You can stop here, Harry told the driver. He groaned and dropped the Muffliato charm before repeating himself. The car stopped, and Harry unfastened his safety belt and reached for his wallet. It's okay, Harry, I've got this, Hermione offered, already taking her wallet out of her handbag. Harry nodded and exited the car, with Draco right behind him. Draco was relieved to be out of the close quarters and to escape the conversation that he didn't understand much of. But when he stared up at the white house that Harry was looking at, he became nervous all over again. Okay, ready? Hermione asked as she stepped up next to Harry. Harry nodded, and they walked up to the path to the front door. Harry looked at Hermione to his left and Draco to his right and knocked firmly on the door. They waited only a few short moments before the door opened. Hello? A man answered. He looked curiously at the three people who stood on his doorstep. It was obvious that they had arrived at the correct house, for the man who answered the door shared the same eyes and mousy brown hair as his son's, only with a beard that matched. Mr. Creevey? Harry asked. Yes, the man said, out of curiosity turning to suspicion. My name is Harry Potter. My friends and I were hoping that we might be able to speak to Dennis. Harry Potter? The man repeated, quite surprised with a little disquiet. Harry's name was quite familiar even to the parents of Muggleborns. But Dennis, I'm sorry, come in. Mr. Creevey stepped aside and opened the door for them. Harry inclined his head politely and entered. Hermione and Draco follow suit. Right in here, Mr. Creevey directed them to the sitting room, but he did not offer them a seat. Hermione and Draco both moved forward at the same time, and Hermione accidentally bumped into a table near the entrance to the sitting room, upsetting a lamp that shattered on the floor. Oh, Merlin, forgive me, Hermione apologized earnestly. I'm so sorry. Is it all right if I mend it? What? Mr. Creevey asked. Oh, yes, thank you. The man seemed rather unsettled, and Hermione cursed herself for not being more careful. She quickly pulled out her wand and easily repaired the lamp. She set it back on the table and looked miserably at Harry. Slowly and carefully, Draco and Hermione entered the sitting room. Robert? A woman called as she neared the room. Who was that at the door? Harry Potter, the man answered bewilderedly. What? The woman asked in surprise. Harry Potter? The woman appeared at her husband's side and stared in shock at the three unfamiliar faces in her home. Yes, ma'am. I'm Harry Potter, and these are my friends, Hermione Granger and Draco Malfoy. We were hoping that Dennis might be available to speak with us for a few minutes, Harry requested. Dennis? But he's not here, she replied with a worried look. He's supposed to be at school, is he not? Harry felt rather confused and wasn't sure what to say. He said that he was having trouble with his studies and that he needed to take summer studies to get caught up before his NEWTs, the woman explained anxiously. Oh, well, we wouldn't know about that as we're not involved with the school. We had just assumed he would be here because it was summer holidays, said Hermione. Well, if you're not involved with the school, then what do you want with Dennis? Mr. Creevey asked peevishly. Just to speak with him, Harry answered. We're with Ministry, Magical Law Enforcement. At this, Mrs. Creevey gasped. Harry hurried to continue. Everything's all right. Dennis isn't in trouble or anything. We just received a tip that someone was planning something against someone that he knows. We're doing everything we can do to prevent it, and we just wanted to talk to him to see if he could help us out in any way. Mrs. Creevey looked extremely unsettled, and the three visitors felt extremely guilty for it. Thank you very much for your time. We'll be going now. We're sorry we bothered you. And even more for causing you worry, Hermione said sincerely. As Harry said, we're just doing everything we can to take care of this. As we're lucky enough to be tipped off, we were taking preventative measures to see what no harm comes to anyone. Thank you, Mr. Creevey replied rather stiffly. He placed a comforting and protective arm around his wife's shoulders. "We'll see ourselves out. Thank you again," said Harry, as he glanced at Draco and Hermione and led the way to the front door. They walked back down the path silently and stopped on the walk. "Hermione?" Harry asked expectantly. "I'm working on it," she said as she stared rummaging through her bag. "Working on what?" Draco asked. "Don't look at her," Harry said. "Look at me and pretend we're having a conversation while she looks through her bag." "We are having a conversation while she looks through her bag. But what is she doing in her bag?" Draco said wryly. "Looking for parchment," Hermione answered distractedly. "What?" Draco said, utterly perplexed. "What do you need with—" "She's checking the wards around the property," Harry explained. "And casting one of my own," Hermione added. "There." Hermione pulled a phone out of her handbag and started a casual stroll down the walk. The boys hurried to catch up to her. "What is that?" Draco asked. "It's a mobile phone," Hermione answered. "A what?" "It's a Muggle device that allows a person to connect with anyone else that has one," Harry explained while she dialed. "Like a Protean charm?" Draco asked. "No, not really. It allows people to speak to one another. It's Muggle technology. Electronic. It sends out signals in the airwaves to satellites orbiting the Earth, or something like that," Harry said with a dismissive wave of his hand. "I don't understand it, and I'm really not that interested in it." "You should be interested in it. It's an extremely helpful tool," Hermione said as she folded the phone shut and put it back in her handbag. "I got his voicemail," she explained. "I'll just call him back in a minute." "Who?" Draco asked, tired of being left in the dark about everything, but getting even more frustrated by having to ask so many questions. It was obvious that Harry and Hermione knew each other well and had worked together on several occasions, as they were able to correctly assume many things about one another. "Ron," Harry answered. "Weasley has one of those things?" Draco asked, unsure whether he was more surprised or appalled. "Yes, which is all the more reason why Harry should have one. The Wizarding world is so much more convenient than the Muggle world in many ways, but communication is not one of them. Mobiles are extremely handy, especially in law enforcement field where owls and flu calls don't do much good when on site," she remarked pointedly at Harry. "Yes, but I rather appreciate not being able to be reached at all times. And why would I need my own anyway? I'm nearly always with you, Ron, or Ginny, who all have them. You're the only ones I wouldn't mind being contacted by, so if you're looking for me, you just call one of the other two," Harry said with a smirk. "But enough about mobiles. I know what I saw in there, but what do you two make of it?" "Well, he's not at school, that's for certain," stated Draco. "Right," Hermione agreed. "The staff has always been very firm about students leaving school for the summer holidays. If he was really having troubles with his studies, he'd need to turn to another student for tutoring outside of school. And now that I think, wasn't this his last year? He should have taken his NEWTs before the end of last term." "Exactly," said Harry. "So now we have to figure out where he is and why he told his parents he was at school if they were telling the truth." "They were," Draco assured him. "Yeah, if they were trying to cover for him, they would have chosen something we couldn't check up on so easily. Not to mention, did you see the look in his mother's eyes when she believed he wasn't there when she thought he was?" Harry nodded. "Right then. I'm going to McGonagall as soon as we get back to make an appointment to see her tonight if I can. This is now a top priority. Not that Pansy isn't," he quickly added. "We still need to know what's going on with her so that we can protect her and her family." "I agree, but I can go speak to McGonagall tonight, Harry. I know you have a date with Ginny," Hermione offered. "No, it's okay. I want to speak to her. Not to mention you'll have Aurelian," Harry reminded her. "I could take him with me. I'm sure McGonagall doesn't have a problem with children. If she does, she is certainly in the wrong profession," Hermione smiled. "You can't push Ginny aside for this." "I won't. This is just really important to me. I'm sure I'll be able to meet with her before our date," Harry replied. At Hermione's stern look, he added, "And if I can't, I'll ask you to." "All right, fair enough," Hermione agreed. "So then—" Hermione stopped talking when a tune came from her handbag. "Sorry, just a second," she apologized as she took out her mobile and answered it. "Ron?" "Yes." "Really? What?" "And?" "Yes, I agree." Hermione's tone became a little discouraged and lost its determination. "I understand why you don't want one of those things," Draco told Harry. "You look like an idiot talking to yourself." Harry smirked, but kept looking at Hermione expectantly. "Yes, I had something I wanted you to look further into," Hermione continued talking to Ron. "Could you look up all the crimes that have taken place in Greater London in the last year, particularly anything around Harrow?" "Yeah, anything." "No. No, he's missing." "Yeah. Do you think you could flu McGonagall for me also? Tell her that Harry's going to be stopping by shortly to see her." Hermione nodded to Harry after she said this. "Yes. If you can just work on pulling those files, I'll be in to help you with them soon. Thanks, Ron." "Yeah. See you soon." With that, Hermione folded up her phone again. "So?" Harry asked. He's going to contact McGonagall right now, so you can probably head over there now, Hermione told him. Ron found something on the Parkinsons, though. What? Draco asked immediately. He perked up with a bit of interest, but his insides squirmed with anxiety. Did Pansy ever mention to you that her father's office was broken into? Hermione inquired. Yes, Draco answered, looking pensive. I had forgotten about that. Ron was looking back for anything in the reports that mentioned the Parkinsons and discovered that 5 months ago, Mr. Parkinson's office was broken into. It appeared that nothing had been taken, but his family's owl was found slaughtered on top of his desk. He filed a report and demanded that the culprit be found and charged, but the next day he came in and said that he wanted to drop the entire thing. He said that he had overreacted, Draco recalled. He said that he was not always well liked by the public and he was bound to be targeted by people from time to time. He didn't want whoever did it to think that it had ruffled him, and as there wasn't really much harm done, he thought it would be best to just let it go. So, he's being threatened, Harry reasoned. That's what Ron and I think too, Hermione agreed. The question now is why? What for? I don't know, but at least I have an idea of what I'm looking for when I speak to Pansy, Draco replied. Good, said Harry. I'm going to go try to talk to McGonagall now. We'll meet tomorrow at some point. I'll owl or flew you both. I'm going to the office now to help Ron, Hermione announced. She turned the corner so that they were out of sight behind some hedges. Good. I might see you there a little later then, Harry told her. He pulled out his wand and nodded to them before he disapparated. Draco nodded to Hermione and removed his own wand, but Hermione reached toward him. Wait, Malfoy? He looked at her in surprise and paused. Can I talk to you a minute? She hesitantly requested. Draco nodded and dropped his wand hand back down to his side. What are you doing today? She inquired nervously. I'm going home for now, he answered. I don't mind helping at the office, but Potter said that Weasley would prefer to see me only when it's unavoidable. Yeah, I know, but that's not what I meant. She looked a bit flustered as she continued. I've been thinking about what you said, and about what I said, about Aurelian, about me thinking it's best that you don't see him, she clarified. Yes, he said stiffly, his attitude gone cold again. Well, I'm not sure if it's the best thing. I'm not sure if it's not, though, either, she quickly added with a bit of force. She sighed and started softly again. I don't know what would be better for him. I was wondering what you were doing because I wondered if you might like to join Aurelian and me for dinner tonight. Draco stared at her completely dumbfounded. Any resentment he felt a second before had vanished from his expression. He just stared at her with his mouth slightly parted in shock. I mean, if you still want to see him, that is, she said slowly and uncertainly. Yes, he answered instantly. Yes, I want to see him, but I already have plans tonight. Mother's been nagging me for weeks about coming to this dinner with her. He spoke more to himself than Hermione. No, I can cancel. No, it's okay, said Hermione. You don't have to cancel. If it would be better, you can come tomorrow night. Oh, wait, you have dinner with Pansy tomorrow night. I'll reschedule, he said so quickly that he startled Hermione. Her incredulous expression mixed with one of suspicion and concern. You can't just... It's fine. I'll just reschedule to have lunch with Pansy instead of dinner. It's no problem. When we were making plans, she asked if I'd rather do lunch or dinner. I chose dinner, but it would probably work out better for her, too, if we did lunch, Draco explained. Hermione had never seen Draco act anything like he was, and she found it very disconcerting. He looked and sounded eager, perhaps a bit desperate. She didn't understand, and she felt extremely uneasy. If you're sure... we could find another time. No, Draco said firmly. I'm not going to allow you the time to change your mind. And it suddenly made sense. That's why he was so desperate and hurried. He was afraid she changed her mind again. She felt a little sorry for him. Okay, tomorrow then, she agreed. I was thinking around 6:30. Is that okay? Yeah. He was calming back down to his usual demeanor, but she could still see the hope and anticipation in his eyes. She continued to stare in his face as she tried to read him. She wanted to understand what this was to him. She just couldn't understand it. You can come over a bit earlier, if you'd like, to see him some before dinner, she offered. Is 6 okay? Yes, 6 is fine, she agreed. They both looked at each other for a few moments, unsure of what to say next. So, 6 o'clock tomorrow, but I will still probably see you at some point in the morning tomorrow. Yeah, I'll see you then, Malfoy concurred. He gripped his wand and was about to apparate when he paused. Granger. Hermione, he corrected. Thank you. Hermione's breath caught. Not only did he say her name, not only did he thank her, but he was so serious when he had said it. She realized then just how much this meant to him, though why, she still wasn't sure. Hermione nodded. Tomorrow.